Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talking Leadership. This is Eric Perez, and today we continue with our leadership podcast series. I'd like to introduce my next guest by going briefly through her background before we get started into the questions proper. So my guest today was the founder of the Learning Tree Wagga. She was the co-founder of Agri Alliance. She was the sponsorship manager for the Australian Livestock Export Corporation, was the advertising and stockist of Grazy Herb, and is currently the founder of Pointer Remote Roles. Can I welcome to the podcast Jo Palmer?
Thanks for having me, Eric.
Jo, how are you? Thank you for joining me. So much like the other podcasts I've got here, I'll start with my opening questions as I tend to do. So in which industry was your first leadership role, and why did you take it on, Jo?
Well, I suppose probably starting back at the start, I trained as a primary teacher. I did an education degree at Charles Sturt in Wagga, and have always taught in small schools, both primary and high school, in generally a learning support and special needs capacity. And so I suppose that my initial sort of soirees, I suppose, into the leadership concept at schools was because quite often I was doing a lot of team teaching with teachers who had students with learning difficulties or challenging behaviour and those sorts of things. I quite often spent time out of school, out of the classroom, doing training and a lot of upskilling to come back and do a lot of training internally within the schools that I was working at. And so I suppose that was probably my first look at it in a career sense. And so I quite often ran training sessions for whole school staff, and then would have to sort of do a lot of, like I said, team teaching and leading through the adoption of new programs and all sorts of bits of those pieces with an education lens. So that's probably my first experience in leadership positions.
Can I unpack that just a little bit, because that's an interesting foray into what the leadership game is. Did you was it a sense amongst the teachers that you were teaching, or the teachers that you were training, that you were the lead person, the go-to person in terms of the content that you were teaching, so that by the nature of what you did, made you the expert in the area for those teachers that you were helping?
Look, I suppose it was a little bit chicken and egg, which one came first. I suppose that I sort of fell into the special needs role within a school, sort of just by default. They'd had maternity leave positions that they hadn't been able to fill, bits and pieces like that. And so in the first job with that hat on, it had actually not been done for a while. And so I suppose the school was very excited when I turned up and was like, yes, quite happy to try my hand at this. And I said, look, I need the support myself to do it. And then because schools are very busy places, and the load on teachers is enormous. And I know everyone sort of says, teachers with their 12-week school holidays a year. I'll tell you what, those 40 weeks where they're at school is pretty hardcore. So I think the fact that there was someone that I wasn't actually on, I had a few classes that I took myself, but majority of my time I wasn't on class, and I was there as a real support person and position for a lot of the teachers. And I think that when people know that they can go to an individual for help in a certain area, that then quite often went into like a lot of programming and like different projects and stuff they were doing within their classroom. So I think that, yes, the training for me and upskilling for me, and I sort of positioned myself by default, but then I sort of grew into the position, I suppose, that people were coming to me for help. And if I didn't have the things that they needed, I then leveraged my position in the school to be able to go and get more training or find more support elsewhere. So, yeah, I think that it probably grew together.
Great. Yeah, that it's an interesting area of work. My partner, she worked in a special school system, and yeah, I learnt from there very much that the school day is not 9 to 5, not 9 to 3, and it's quite a different world. And unless you're in it, you don't really understand it. And that gives some context, I guess, for that if you, like you said, if you orient yourself to be the go-to person, then by default and then by planning, that you become the leader resource in that area. And that's particularly important, especially in a school system, because people are so busy that if they've got someone that they can rely on, you become quite critical to that teacher base that you're working with. And I only have a very small insight into this because I'm very active in my high school where my sons go, and I've seen what teachers go through. And I was the idiot growing up, thought that teachers went to school, had an easy job, and went home and just clocked off. And it's nothing of the sort. So I've been
Mm.
schooled up, and it's nice to hear that that there's others that can learn from this kind of conversation, because yeah, it's not an easy gig. So can I ask you then, as a segue into the next question around leadership versus and/or management, in that experience and in other roles that you've had, have you experienced a difference? Sorry, I'll rephrase this. Experienced a difference between leadership and management in your leadership pathway?
Yeah, I suppose that, well, like you said, the little introduction sort of gives your listeners a bit of an insight into the fact that I realistically probably have undiagnosed ADHD myself and jump around a fair bit. But no, I think you, in any job and in any industry, you see both leaders and managers. Like, you experience that in a workplace anywhere. And I think quite often you'll see that people in a leadership or management position can possess good qualities and attributes of both of those areas. I suppose for me, I didn't realise, like I did a teaching degree. Look, do you know what? You shouldn't knock yourself for thinking I was one of those people that did a teaching degree, because I was like, cool, 12 weeks of holidays a year. I can go travelling
No.
see the world. And it's a really, like, a great job that you can work anywhere in the world. And
No, thank
I
you for being so nice,
that I
Joe.
really underestimated the transferable skills
Yep.
that were involved in teaching. And so that's been something, as I transitioned out of teaching and have sort of the differences between managing people and leading people. I tell you what, it's a learning thing every day.
So, Joe, can you tell me, in your travels as a leader, the way in which you deal with mistakes or errors that can be attributed to your leadership?
I think that I have very much established over the years of plenty of mistakes, that literally, honesty is the best policy. And I think I've found since founding Pointer, I'm a very non-technical founder of a tech business, that the mistakes are many regularly. And so I have always had the attitude that I very much put my hand up as soon as I see a mistake has happened, and am always very much hand on heart apologetic. And I think that people really appreciate, especially when they're really when they're just as passionate about what you're doing as you are, they are very forgiving. And realistically, no one wants to see you balls things up. Like, and that's advice I was given to me a few times from a few different people, of like, when I've got up to speak at events and things like that, no one in the audience ever wants to see someone crumble on stage. No one really wants to see you do a bad job. And so I think that when mistakes, which are inevitable and in my case happen very regularly, I think the first thing to do is just to literally to tell people. I think that's the worst thing, is to not. And so I don't know, example being yesterday, I had a look at our CRM, and my business development manager, we'd set up a big campaign, and she's been talking to a lot of companies, like she made 80 odd phone calls or something in the last 2 weeks. And I had a look at our CRM and I was like, why has she only made like 8 calls in the last thing? And it was because I had obviously messed up the automation thing on the end, and she was beside herself because she thought it was her fault. And I was like, no, this is definitely my fault. But I said to her that this is something that we can very much flip into like a positive, to literally you can then re-ring those businesses and say, look, sorry, my boss has had a doozy with our tech. Can you give me your email address or something again, like on this? But I said, for us, it's actually ended up being a bonus in that we've got to have another touch point with these companies that she'd already been speaking to with and people love it. People love that we are honest and human. I think that's been something. And so I try and I think that's what I try and think about when mistakes happen, is to own it. And quite often they can end up turning into a positive anyway. So
interesting that you mentioned that mistakes humanize you, and that's a very new addition to the feedback I'm getting from people that I'm talking to about leadership, is that you mentioned it's a learning opportunity, it's a way to re-engage with others, and it humanizes what you do. But I never gave a lot of thought to admitting to a mistake and just dealing with it actually humanizes the leader themselves.
Yeah, and you know what? I probably haven't, until we've just said this, I've probably actually not thought of that as such a profound thing, but I suppose it really is. Like I think that I've especially like with the businesses that I've started. So Point is the third company that I've started that I have always had a lot of client contact. So the Learning Tree was a comprehensive learning centre that I actually had 3 sites. The first was in Holbrook in southern New South Wales, then in Finley in the Riverina, and then we opened in Wagga. And when I was sort of running it full steam, I had 30 teachers working for me over it, like across 3 towns, and dealing with parents of children that we were tutoring or running school holiday programs with, and all of these things. So it was just huge numbers of people doing it all remotely, which is hilarious that's what I've ended up doing now. But managing people, there is a lot of human error all the time. And so I would have kids turn up and tutors hadn't been there, or someone's been sick and tutors have turned up and kids weren't there, and just the managing logistics. And I think that when I would literally get on the phone as soon as I'd heard things, say, look, I'm really sorry, this is what's happened. Like, I can only imagine the logistics. Sorry, I know you've got other kids here that you're doing ballet and tutoring at the same time and all of these things. And then people just, you might be wild as the consumer on the end, but then you get the owner of the business rings you and said, look, I'm really sorry, we've made a mistake and I understand. I'm a mother, I deal with logistics of children, all of these sorts of things. They say, oh, hang on, that's right. She's a one-man band that's running this logistical nightmare, and they automatically are far more sympathetic and understanding and are willing to forgive and forget and move on, and they become your biggest advocates. Because that's what I found, especially with the Learning Tree, is the fact that when mistakes happened and I would ring up and deal with them ASAP, that was the feedback that I got when new families came and started with us. They said, oh, well, so-and-so referred you and said, look, she had some dramas and you dealt with it really well. So that was a selling point for us. So I don't know. Like I said, I haven't actually thought about that as I'm not going to deliberately start making mistakes so we can fix them up to then to do it. But it's an interesting thought.
Mate, I'm here to ask the interesting questions. So here's another one for you. What's the most difficult part of being a leader in your travels, Jo?
As cliche as it sounds, it can be a bit lonely. I think that you can, I don't know, it's tricky finding that balance of being the leader and the boss and the manager and wearing all of those hats when you don't have someone else with skin in the game. So when I co-founded Agri Alliance, it was really good because my business partner and I, we had skin in the game together and you had a sounding board. But the other companies, it's been me, and I've now exited Agri Alliance and am back to just me with Pointer. And I think that that's what has taken me a long time. I'm a bit embarrassed with how long it's taken me to work it out, but that those sounding boards don't need to and shouldn't be your employees majority of the time. They should be your mentors and your support crew that you build around you. And the last 12 months, I've really, really formalized that a lot more. I've got 3 or 4 mentors that I speak to almost weekly, at least 1 or 2 of them a week, and they're my ones that I go with, like the forecasting spreadsheet that I cry to with, like, oh God, this is like the financial things or the HR challenges or challenges with difficult clients or things like that. I think that's where I've found that I need to go externally for support with a lot of those stuff. Obviously keeping my team involved, and but it needs to, I think, be a lot more positive when it's with your team, and you go elsewhere when you need the genuine, and when you need to hear the bad stuff as well. I think sometimes you get in this echo chamber of like a lot of back patting and yeah, you're doing a great job, and you often need your mentors to tell you your baby's ugly.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, look, I appreciate your honesty with that response. And again, it's thrown up something that hasn't been discussed a lot in these podcasts, but has been alluded to in 1 or 2 of them. And you've actually put words to them, is that where do leaders go when they need to ask questions or detox or just compare notes with someone who's not an employee about what's happening in their life as a leader, business owner. I get the strong sense that you're very entrepreneurial in the spaces where you set up businesses. So, yeah, how do you find these people and mentoring? And it's an issue that I want to touch on in podcasts in the future. Is when I've asked that question of a few of the other guests that I've had, it's mentoring has been typically informal, but it sounds to me that you've got some, is it formal arrangements with these people that you speak to?
Well, they started informally, and
Right.
I feel that it moved to, with 2 of my mentors in particular, I sort of was just like, okay, I feel that this is where I lean on you now, and I just wanted to put some boundaries around what that looked like so that I wasn't ringing them at 11 o'clock at night to decompress on things. But yeah, look, it's formal. Like, I don't pay them. Like, it's not formal in that respect. And I
Yeah, that's
realistically,
not what I meant. That's not. So
no, but they,
by level of formality, I mean something like you've got something in your diary at least once a week with some of them every week or every month. That
I
degree
would
of
love to say
formality.
that. Well, I would love to say that it's that formal. It's not really. It's more. It just happens that I need to
Okay.
ask
Yep.
any questions.
Yep. And
So I don't know.
it's not out of whack. I think it's very consistent with what leaders do, because something I've thought of for a long time, and I'm getting to an age now where you're going, for example, to see doctors more often about things as you get older. And I often think, who does a doctor go when they want to see another doctor, and how does that work? So someone who's in a profession, and why I think stuff like that is when you've got your head in a professional space, it's only people like yourself that can understand where the hell you're coming from. And so just to draw this out a little bit, because I could talk to you about this for ages, and there's a lot more questions I've got for you. But one of the things for me in this this mentoring thing is, has it helped you to be a better leader, to have someone available to talk to when you've got questions around what you're doing?
100%.
Okay.
100%. Like, I
Brilliant.
literally not. And I think there's another facet of my soundboarding that has been absolutely pivotal to everything that I've done, from as far as like support, but also decision making, massive pivots with businesses, selling businesses, starting new businesses, all that, was a group of my friends. So we have probably been going for 5 years now. So we have a formal business group that we set up, that friends 5 years ago were all in a relatively, this is when I had the learning tree, there was a group of us, there's seven businesses that we said, hey, we're all friends, and we were friends, some from childhood friends through to friends that we'd met more recently, but a group of friends that had all started their own businesses that were thinking, hang on, we're all sort of just floating around, not actually knowing what we're doing, and we don't have that sounding board. And so we actually formalized that. We engaged a business coach for maybe 6 months, I think, to get us up and running. And we had monthly meetings, and it was a very formal thing in that we signed like privacy agreements. We open up the books, so I'm financially, like, I know the financials of all of these other businesses, but we had a very, like, an agendaed meeting. It was minuted. We had action items. We had buddies that you had to have at least one catch up with during the month. Like, that is the most priceless thing. And we were so lucky that it literally started with a pub conversation with two of the businesses, and they were like, hang on, we're doing this, and then hang on, look at this group of friends of ours that are all starting businesses, we should do this together. And we are the envy of a huge number of our friends who have started businesses since they said, oh, we want to get in on what you guys have got. But to the point where, like, one of my mentors, actually, her business actually now facilitates these sorts of things, putting people together with a structured, strategic working together. And so we set our business group up pretty much as like a board for each other's business. So
wow, okay.
Yeah, so we helped with hiring and firing, with acquisitions of other businesses, like I said, selling of businesses, all sorts of stuff. So that has played a huge, huge role in my development as a business owner and starter. Because, look, I said I've got an education degree and had never started a school. Like, it was very much everything that I've done has sort of rolled into each other, but it definitely was not anything that I'd ever had any formal training in. And I wasn't in a business environment as such. I was in a school, in a very different environment. So my business group has been absolutely pivotal in most of the business decisions that I've made. So
yeah, it's a shame, because I have a million questions that come to mind about grouping, but we'll park that, and I definitely will come back to you on that one. So Joe, how do you measure success as a leader? And I'm hearing that forming this group is what one real life example of success in your leadership pathway, but in general terms, within your own business, for example, what do you class as success?
I think for me, I'm just sort of thinking, as you're saying, I think about like the vision and mission that I've done for Pointer, and what my core values are, and they translate pretty much from life into business, and my core values are pretty much the same for both. But for me, as a leader in the business, I see my team engagement pretty much as I don't know that you obviously can't measure that as such in as far as you can with KPIs and outputs and those sorts of things in a more business sense. But for them, for my success, I'm measuring how much they're enjoying working, because their enjoyment literally translates into business success. Like, if you've got employees that pretty much are dreading getting up in the morning and coming and working for you, like, how can that business be as successful as it can be? So for me, I think it's like Richard Branson's all over this. He's like, everyone sort of says, oh, the customer's always right, or your customer's your number one priority. I think that if your team is, then they in turn make your customers the priority. So for me, that's most of my key indicators are pretty much around staff engagement, staff enjoyment. We do a hump day selfie photo that on Wednesdays, like our internal comms thing, pings everyone so they've got to text a photo in of where they're working from on Wednesday and what they're doing. So we see might be at the supermarket, or there might be kids around, or they could be like one of the girls is working from a co-working space in Byron Bay this week just because she wanted to get coastal. She lives near Armidale. So
wow, that would be interesting, particularly if you got one of your team at a parent-teacher interview. This is me pre the interview. This is me post the interview.
Yeah.
That's quite an insight that your people being your most important asset. Then,
Well, look, I wanted to build a company that I wanted to work for. And that was, like I said, this is my third time round at doing this. And so I've done things very differently this time. And I've really looked at what was important for me. I've got 2 small kids. I wanted a job that was flexible, but that I could still get 100% out of myself. And then again, I suppose it's the concept and the industry that I'm now working in. But if you make a job flexible and family friendly, and that actually a work-life balance is more of a reality, then of course your staff are going to stick around, and of course they're going to perform for you, because they're like, literally, like the amount of email.
So before you go on, where can I send you my CV? Because I think I need.
I was literally about to say that.
And this is the thing that, and this is another. I really love these conversations that, from an entrepreneurial sense, and I've had the good fortune to talk to a couple of people that are entrepreneurial like yourself, that they've created a space where they work that reflects their core values, and therefore it's a place that they would like to be employed. Now, some of them, like yourself, until you're asked this question by an idiot such as myself, you start thinking about what that means, and that's quite a powerful signal to send to staff members, is that if you weren't the owner, you would love to work here because of the kind of culture that's set up, and that could be a series of 50 different discussions around all culture. So you set me up with a bit of a quandary, mate, because I'm going to come back to you in a couple of other podcasts around this stuff, because there's something that is coming out in some of these discussions around those that set up these businesses, and what does that mean for their leadership style versus working for a corporate or another organization, or in how we started the podcast, being a teacher, that you don't control, you don't get to, sorry, not control is not the right word, you don't get to have an influence over everything that happens in that workspace, unless either you are the CEO or the head, or you own the organization. That has some powerful implications for how you act as a leader. Does that make sense?
It does. I sort of agree with you, but then I push back slightly in that I think you can, I don't know, I still think there's this element of being in charge of your own destiny slightly. Like, I feel there is still the opportunity, if you work for a corporate, to have the team culture that we do. I think that it just, I don't know though, my thing is that, do you love the job that you do, like the tasks that you're doing every day, enough to not like your boss or to not like the team culture? And I think that most of the time people will take culture over the actual tasks and things that they're doing, because you spend so much time at work. So I don't know, I sort of think that if you can create a culture, even if it's in your team within a corporate, it makes it a far more enjoyable workplace, and you're more productive and stuff.
I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not having a go at the corporate sphere. I just use that as an example. So for me, when you ask, so I work in the seafood industry, is my 9-to-5 job, and people ask, because I've been in the game for about 10 years, what do you like about the industry that you work in? I don't talk about industry anymore. I talk about working with the people that I get to work with, because that's what keeps me focused on working for industry. All the other stuff is peripheral, and I do say to people, and I think I'm talking to a kindred spirit here, that when I wake up, I look forward to doing what I do, although there are pressures that go with it, and all the other things that you get from being the head of a small business or large business or whatever, that I really am energized to do the best for this group of people that I work for. And I quite like it, but that's what.
But has that come from your manager though? Like, I think that if you're like if you can hear your employees, like for your manager to hear your comment to me saying that like you love going to work, you're motivated to do the best that you can for that. That's like the dream thing for a boss to hear. But would you give credit to them for nurturing that in you?
I'm meant to be asking the questions. That's cool. No, it's actually a good question. So I'm actually the CEO of a small industry body comparatively to our brother and sister bodies across the country. But in the industry that I work in, I'm a sole operator and I work to a board. And yeah, look, I've got to say all of my board members without exception have nurtured an interest and a curiosity in my industry that I didn't think I would have. And I will credit a particular board member that I had that first recruited me that said, once this industry gets in your blood, it's hard to get it out of the system. And I didn't believe her then. And right now I can say that she was right. Once you get in, you want to keep working at what you're doing. And so, yeah, I've spoken to my board about this individually, about why I enjoy the things that I enjoy in the work. And part of it is being allowed to, one, make mistakes, like you said before, but two, being allowed to be a professional and do the things that you need to do. Now, I will be the first to say, much like you have, that I've made a shitload of mistakes and you have to learn from them, but they're not the kind of mistakes that put the business at jeopardy. It's more about my handling of little things and some big things. And once I learned to get my ego out of the way, I started to learn a lot more, because I in my younger days, and I can't speak for yourself or the listeners, but I did chase money as a status thing for, hey, if you're in a high position, you should be after the dollars. And since I became a dad and my kids are in their teens now, this particular job has allowed me to watch my kids grow up. So I've had a benefit that a lot of people don't get to see their kids grow, and that's helped me to become a better leader, I think, in the longer term. So yeah, that's so for the listeners, this is the first time someone's asked me a question that actually got me thinking about stuff. So thank you, Joe. I might get back onto the script here, but I'd really like to get your views on. It's a two-part question. On the job experience develops a better leader, as does formal education. Now, do you agree with that as a truism for leadership or not?
I don't know. I've never done any formal training, so I'm very much the former. I don't know. I haven't got a huge amount. I think, look, I can remember doing one of my pracs when I was at uni, and the teacher that was supervising said, "Oh, yeah, I know you've got to go to uni and you need that ticket." She's like, "You're going to learn more in your first week in the classroom that you will have for 4 years at uni." So, which she could not have been more correct, because I taught in Australia for about 8 weeks, and then I moved to England and started casual teaching, and wowzers, that 8 weeks in Australia did not prepare me for day one of casual teaching in a low socioeconomic school in England, I promise you. But I don't know. I think that as cliche as it sounds, I think my training has very much come a lot more from doing things like that. Casual teaching in England, or working at a ski resort in California, and I've done lots of random stuff, and I think that that's been way more school of life than any other actual formal training. So look, I'm not very good at. But actually, do you know what? In saying that, I recently had an interview, and one of the questions was around formal leadership training, and my position. That point has sort of given me this bit of a platform for advocating for the regions and regional professionals and regional businesses. And her question was around, like, where do you think some holes are as far as you becoming furthering this position in sort of an advocacy role. And I sort of said, I don't know, what do you think around formal stuff? And she said, I feel that that's where you're at the stage now, is that maybe something more formal would be beneficial. Like, you've done School of Life, and now that probably to get some more traditional strategies and theory behind it could be of benefit to me. So look, I'm very open to suggestions and discussions around it. But yeah, I definitely haven't had any formal sort of leadership training as such.
Wow. Okay. And I've had a similar response to another entrepreneur that I interviewed in the IT sector, and he said he got to grade 12 and he had a passion for something in the IT space, set up his first business, and he never looked back. And as a consequence, now he's got multiple businesses that he runs related to the area that is his passion. And when I asked him about this question around does formal training or leadership training make for better leaders, he said, look, what training has done for him later on in his career was just add to the toolkit that he already had to run the business. It didn't necessarily make him a better leader, but gave him more tools to draw from. And that was interesting to me, because I think in your traditional business model, when people pay for someone to get trained up, they assume they're going to get necessarily a more insightful and better leader automatically because of that training. Whereas sometimes that training might just make that person a better organizer, or might be better at networking, or something that is not as tangible as saying, well, I got this percent better as a strategic thinker, or this percent better as a communicator. And it's a difficult space to play in. And the more that I'm speaking to people, the more that the grayness, because there is no black and white around developing leaders, is an ongoing concern. Is that something that you found in the training?
Yeah, just listening to you saying that, maybe that's what it is, that the formal, I think maybe the error is doing formal leadership training with people that are too early in their career, and maybe doing it later is better, because you then are almost like corralling life experience and shelving it into a more systematic or ordered manner, that you can be like, oh, okay, well, that experience actually, when you read the theory, even if it's reflection on, I could have dealt with that better, or, oh, okay, those strategies really worked for that situation in life, and maybe that's what the formal training, I don't know, maybe.
Mate, the last statement here, and this one, I'm extremely interested to get your response on this one. Leaders are born, not made.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. This is the thing, I suppose, because I don't know, leadership is something that it's not, I suppose, something that I've gone out to do, or even I don't think I've actually ever referred to myself as being a leader before. It's only when people sort of point out, like, oh, okay, you've got staff and teams, and of course, obviously, you are a leader doing things like that.
Yep.
So I don't know, born or made. Ooh.
Remembering too, there is no right or wrong here. So I'm incredibly chuffed that when you ask the question, people think, oh, there must be a right answer here. Of course there's not. But my personal view is I'm still on the fence on it. I've changed my mind on every podcast when I've talked to people, but I think it's a mix of both for me. But in that sense, I can't speak for you. So what, are you a fence sitter, or do you have a position?
No, I'm just sort of thinking it through. So like you said, there's it's a grey scale of what a leader looks like. Is a leader the one that the traditional thing that you picture is like the head of the company, the person that gets paid the most, the person that runs meetings, all of those sorts of things that you sort of by default, and thanks to Hollywood and all of these things, that you think of that person being the leader. But then, I don't know, you then see leadership just take so many different forms. So how do you, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't even know if I'm a fence sitter on it. I think that with life experience and formal training maybe you can make people. I've got a girlfriend sitting here who said you are totally 100% born a leader. So from someone looking in, it's born, but I don't know. I don't know, because I think sometimes that you then like might be thinking like, oh, I'm not a leader. I'm the person who likes sort of being given instructions, quite happy to follow along. But I don't think that you then, if that's how you are in your 20s or when you're working for someone else, that you're then that for life. I think it's something that you probably transition to and from, and quite often I wake up and think I wish someone else could just be the boss today because I'm really tired of making decisions.
Someone else, yeah, okay.
I'm really tired of being the responsible one. I'm still like that parent that looks around when my kids like stack it and skin knees waiting for like the adult to turn up, and I'm like, oh, that's me now.
Oh, that's me. Okay, the next question is around, and this is I'm completing, I'm hoping in the next little while, my own studies around leadership and particularly some leader capabilities. And I just want to get your take on what your thoughts on strategic thinking and foresight as being what's their relative importance to being a leader. So do you think they're important for a leader to have, or not important, or you're not sure, or somewhere in the middle?
I think that there definitely needs to be strategic thinking and planning when you've got a team. If it's just you freewheeling around, which a lot of the time it has been for me, that I've done a whole lot of bumbling through. And I think as soon as you have people whose actual wage depends on your decision making and things, you need to be far more strategic around it. So no, I think that is very necessary. And it, like I said, when you're doing this by yourself, not having strategic things to check back on yourself and to keep things, okay, was that working? Moving forward, where are we going? Oh, that was a balls up. Let's do something else. Like I think that there needs to be strategy so that there can be checks and balances. You should do it for yourself as well, but definitely when you've got a team.
Okay, and the final one, and this one I'm definitely interested in getting your feedback on. What would you say to a younger version of yourself about being a better leader?
I don't know. I'm not really all that down on that retrospective talking to younger Joe. Younger Joe did what younger Joe needed to do at the time, which involved a lot of beer. I don't know. I don't know. I think a better leader. I don't know. I think I'm the leader that I need to be and where I should be, and moving forward, then you can always make decisions moving forward. I think I'm the way I am because of everything that I've done, because of the mistakes, because of the incidental meeting people. I hate the word networking, but I love meeting people, and I'm very good at staying in touch with people. And I love being able to think when I meet someone like, oh, who would be someone really awesome that I could introduce them to that would be mutually beneficial for those people? Like that's just something that I think I've done since I was a child. So the fact that this has been able to turn into a business and then an attribute that has made me a leader, now that we're saying that out loud, I feel like I'm at AA saying I'm an alcoholic. But no, I don't know. I wouldn't change stuff, I don't think.
Excellent. That's one of the more entertaining ways to respond to that question. Look, for the listeners, I've been talking to Jo Palmer. Look, I appreciate your time, Jo. I know that you are busy like we all are in this crazy world. Thanks for your time, and I will extend an invitation to have you chat with the listeners again into the future, because there's a lot of topics in this space that I want to talk to people about and get some information out to the world about, because there's only so much you can read out of books about what leadership is. And I think listening to people like yourself is a good way to get people oriented around the fact that leadership isn't one thing. So Thank you for your time, Jo.
No, well, thanks for asking me, and it's been quite quite enlightening. Let's be honest.
Okay, thanks very much. And
Thanks, Eric.
for those listening, thank you, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.